Hello Mr. Gunn, this is Jim Parkhouse, as you've probably gathered. We're all sorry to hear that you've been unwell recently, and we are taking this opportunity to wish you a speedy recovery. We thought that as you were unable to visit us, it might be an idea to make a video to give you some idea of our recent operations here at ELeakeTour. We hope to take you on a tour of engineering and production, and hopefully some operations in our test borehole. Richard Smith is operating the camera for us. He kindly volunteered, and in the event of you seeing him, we have a few problems. Now let's walk into engineering. Here's Alan Styling.
Still here after all these years. Hi Mr. Gunn, sorry to hear you're a bit under the weather. This should give you a laugh anyway.
Alan, could you show us how we go about laying out a printed circuit board, please?
Yes, certainly.
Great.
All this is done on computers these days. This is Colin initially drawing the circuit diagram, which was then can be transferred to another computer on a floppy disk for the actual layout to be completed. It doesn't move about, you see. Complete, we can plot it on a sheet of paper or film so that the engineer can check that it's actually what he wanted. That it's well. Phil is now using that information to do the actual layout of the board from which the board will finally be made.
What's the significance of the colours?
The red and blue are on opposite sides. So we've actually got two layers on this one. So
Fine.
Circuit diagram, and that would be a manufacturing drawing for the layout of the board.
Fine. Thank you, Alan. Let's move on. Mick Chaplin.
Hello there.
Mick, could you show us what progress we've made with computer-aided design?
Yeah, but we have to move over and go and see Colin.
Have we been operating this system?
This is Colin, and we've had what we call Anvil 1000, and we've recently upgraded to Anvil 5000, and Colin's just trying to get to grips with that. We've had it 2 months now. There's still quirks and things that he's pulling his hair out with.
But you are winning, Colin.
Still got some left, yeah.
How many designs have we got on the system?
How many? It's difficult to say. There are a lot of drawings and components that Colin's had to put on to get just one design on. For instance, this is a design, a tool which we've been making about 15 years now, 10 or 15 years. And we've recently done a series of modifications to it to correct a few minor failings in use. And a lot of parts move relative to each other. When that's drawn to scale through a drawing board, it's very difficult to say, if that moves here, what is the gap there? On CAD, it's completely accurate, and we've been able to use that to squeeze extra components in this space to try and correct these field
Excellent.
problems.
At a later stage, I hope we'll be able to see that tool. Next laboratory. Now we'll move into production. Keith Millington.
Hello, Mr. Gunn. Nice to be able to speak to you by the medium of the latest technology, video recorders. We'll now take you around the workshop to show you certain things in progress.
Fine.
The sonic song is final testing. It's in a tank of water, and you can see the pulses that it's producing.
This is the tool that we saw on Colin's CAD system. Perhaps you could tell us about it, Keith.
This is a new mineral development, a 2 1/4 OD 4-arm dip meter. This is the first prototype being assembled.
Having problems, Steve? I'm sure we'll get it sorted out. Now we've moved into the stores. Quite an important part of the operations, isn't it, Keith?
Yes, all the components, either manufactured inside or purchased from outside, come through the stores prior to being kitted up into assemblies.
This is the route that dip meter's followed.
That's correct. This is the carousel. It's quite a recent acquisition. It contains 8,000 different components. We can either retrieve the components manually. Perhaps you'd like to show us, Nigel. Or we can download from the computer. Where we would have a complete printed circuit board, set of components would be retrieved automatically. It does make you ask the question, what do we do with the card system?
Tell us about this area, please, Keith.
Yes, we're reorganising the oven test area due to the arrival of the vibration table.
Will all tools go through this?
Yes, all tools and sub-assemblies will be vibration tested as they are temperature tested in the oven and pressure tested in the pressure test chamber.
That should improve the field performance.
Certainly.
Keith?
It's a pleasure, Mr. Gunn. Goodbye.
And now we'll go and see if we can find someone else. Here's Malcolm Cherry.
Hello, Mr. Gunn. A face from the past, you may remember. Still here and distinctly part of the furniture. We're still in the same business, you will be well aware. Things are looking pretty good. We're all kept very busy here, supporting the people around the world. I expect Mr. Reeves has kept you abreast of the number of different operations that we get involved in from time to time. It's still an exciting business, which is why it's kept me here for all of, I believe it's now 30 years. Indeed, we had a retirement, you're going to have to scrub that bit.
No,
I used the wrong word.
Dick referred to it as.
A retirement dinner, no. A 25 years and over dinner that he hosted a few weeks ago, which was most enjoyable for our ladies as well, and gave us an opportunity to reflect on some of the good old days which you would have remembered had you been there that evening.
We made it 140 years worth of service, but perhaps Mr. Gunn could corroborate that.
Well, it's nice to be able to talk to you this afternoon.
Malcolm's got quite an interesting photograph on his office wall. Perhaps you'd like to tell us about it, Malcolm.
Indeed. Step this way. Well, here we have a photograph of the company as it existed in 1970. I have it on very good authority, after much research, that date is within at least 6 months of being accurate. Do you remember these legs, I asked myself? What styles our ladies used to wear in those days? There's a few faces that are still around. That young chap there is not quite so young these days, but otherwise he looks very much like the Keith Millington that you could find next door today. Immediately behind him we have Alan, who again is readily recognisable some 25 years later. Who else have we got?
Jim's not quite so recognisable.
Well, that Jim has just pointed out that he's there. Now he's covered in fuzz here. He was obviously hiding his inner personality at this point in time. Pleased to say that in subsequent years he's let it all hang out, as it were. Here's a young chap here who is wearing half of a fuzz. That's me with a moustache, which I used to sport with a full beard one day I shaved off the beard when it froze to my balaclava in Canada. When I came back to ELeake, everybody else remarked that I'd grown a moustache. Such is life. This young chap on the end here, well, no doubt you will be able to recognise him. He's still at the helm. A little wider possibly, a little older, but nevertheless, I don't think the last 25 years has done him any harm either. So that's the lineup as we had it in 1970.
Thank you very much, Mark. And here is Jim Atkin.
Hello, Mr. Gunn. Remember when I first joined the company? It was in 1974. I remember coming down to the old Ferguson house on Marylebone Road for interview, in fact, and meeting, well, for interview with Roy Helm. And I met you for the first time then. And the Ferguson house was the place where we had our early board meetings and AGMs with Mike Watmo and Mr. Johnson, I remember. I'm still company secretary, but no longer of the old BBB Instruments company. Now it's Wireline Technologies. I think that's it, and goodbye and best wishes.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, so that wasn't a lot better, was it?
Here's somebody else who spends most of his working day in front of the terminal. Richard Root.
I don't know if you remember me, Mr. Gunn. We first met in Canada. It was, well, I went there in '74, and I think I must have met you in '76 on the occasion of me breaking my leg rather foolishly in the car park of premises in Canada. And I always remember your kindness in visiting me and bringing me some reading material to a hospital bed in Calgary where I spent 7 weeks without moving.
Richard. That must have been dreadful.
Well, I did save some money. I didn't get to spend the holiday money that I'd put aside for 2 years. But the other occasion I remember meeting you specifically was at the occasion of your retirement in the Victoria Club in Nottingham, which I think was one of the more memorable of the social occasions of the company. It was excellent, and access to casino tables and the like had never been seen before or since.
Not part of your normal orbit. Yeah.
Anyway, I value the opportunity to say hello to you, and I wish you well. Okay.
We've now moved down to the borehole to find Nick Reed and Mel Gwynn logging a mineral sonic tool. Quite a setup, Nick.
Hi, Mr. Gunn. I heard about this a couple of days ago and I'm off to Canada tomorrow, so Richard kindly decided to do this at home, which is good of him. Not too good a weather for barbecuing though, but I guess it'll be the last this year. Anyway, cheers, Mr. Gunn. Nice showing.
Now here's someone whose office has a fine view of the golf course. James Harvey.
Hello, Mr. Gunn. I don't know whether you recognise me, but I met you, I think, in the late 70s in Indonesia, and I'd just like to wish you all the best.
Thank you, James. Here is Roger Samworth.
Hello, Mr. Gunn. Thought you might like to see the latest version of our good old code combination song that we made a lot of money with in the 70s. This is the tool here, and this is its calibrator. There goes the calibrator. This particular tool is now being designed to be used in slim oil wells. This particular one has been down a 12,000-foot well in Wyoming, in America. It's also been in a horizontally drilled well in Germany. Its response has been very successful, and we're hoping it'll make all our fortunes in the not too distant future.
Yeah.
It's hope you find this a bit more interesting than Talking Head, and I wish you well.
Thank you very much, Roger. At last we found two ladies who might recognise Mr. Gunn. Pat Adcock
Hello, Mr. Gunn. Nice to talk to you again.
and Olwyn Cole.
Hello, Mr. Gunn.
Olwyn, you're retiring soon, aren't you?
I'm retiring in 3 weeks tomorrow.
3 weeks. After how long?
18 years I've been with BPP.
18 years. You remember the retirement party for Mr. Gunn?
I do, at the Victoria Club in Nottingham. One of the best parties we've had at BPP.
Pat's even got the menu.
There you are.
Olwyn, I'm sure Mr. Gunn would like to wish you a happy and healthy retirement.
Thank you very much. Bye, Mr. Gunn. Bye-bye.
Here's Rob Hyde.
Hello, Mr. Gunn. Some time since I've seen you now, but having this opportunity to talk to you through a camera has reminded me of the time that you came to visit me in Canada. I think it was in 1973. The weather was reasonably pleasant, but I was the only person there. It was just before Christmas. I quite clearly remember you coming, and we looked around the workshop, and you suggested one or two things I could do, substantially painting the unit to make it look a bit better for the customer. Thinking about those days remind me now of how well Canada is doing. I'm sure Dick has filled you in with their progress. They employ 50 or 60 people, and with unthinkable turnover in those days. But it's pleasing to know how much we've moved forward, and that there was some value in being there in December '73 and wondering what it was all about. I hope that you enjoy this film and look forward to the day that we might perhaps see you down here again. Goodbye.
We found James Harvey and Nick Reed along in Oilfield Sonic this time. John Cohen.
Good afternoon, Mr. Gunn. I hope you are keeping well. It's been a long time since we've had the opportunity of talking to each other, and I'm very pleased that this opportunity has now arisen.
John, I believe you just come back from Kazakhstan. Would you like to tell Mr. Gunn about it?
Certainly. Perhaps it's better if we move across to the wall chart. If I might just introduce this projection of Central Asia to you, Mr. Gunn. You can recognize here the Baltic Sea with the 3 Baltic states, Moscow itself, and as we go further east, we come to the Caspian Sea, which is the western shore of Kazakhstan, and this republic, the largest of the former Soviet republics, stretches all the way across to China, through the other stands, to Afghanistan, and to Iran. The biggest interest these days is on the eastern shore of the Caspian Sea, where there's a lot of interest in oil and gas exploration. A number of Western oil companies are based here, and they are in fact developing oil and gas fields that have been discovered in the last 10 or 15 years. Our own interest lies not in this area, but more in the central part of Kazakhstan, based on the town of Kizil Orda, which you might just be able to see here. North of this town, by 60 or 160 kilometers, lie a number of oil fields and some gas fields. And we hope very soon, before the end of this month, to have a small team out in this area here to do some perforation work. For most of the month of October, I was based here in the capital, Almaty, which is on the very edge of the huge mountain range separating Kazakhstan from China. It's a very picturesque setting, but my business there was dealing with the government authorities to obtain the licenses required to import radioactive materials and our various types of explosives. Well, Mr. Gunn, I hope that's given you some idea of the areas of the world in which we're now becoming interested, and I'm sure you will agree they are very exciting. Goodbye.
Thank you, John.
Hello, Mr. Gunn. Mike Spencer. I joined the company about 1980, really to try and help with getting the oil field equipment underway. We've come a long way since then. I'm considerably greyer than I was when I first came to the company. I put weight on. I probably smoked twice as many cigarettes as I did at that stage. Most of it's down to Dick, I'm afraid, one way or another. You probably know the feeling, I suspect, having been with him for so long now. To try and put in perspective really where we're trying to take the company, I think it would be interesting if we take you downstairs to our conference room. We've got a nice arrangement down there of really the history of the company, and perhaps I can explain a bit better where I came in, what we did for probably 15 years, and where we think we're going next. Hello again, Mr. Gunn. We've moved down to our conference room now in the ground floor of the building. What we have on permanent display down there is a complete, really the history of BPB instruments from the very early years. And quite honestly, the other day Dick did say that he came for his first interview in 1959. At that time I was a very young man, in fact, and just joined the Royal Air Force for an apprenticeship for 3 years, and stayed there for about another 15. The display really charts almost exactly sort of 10 to 15 years per panel of what we've actually achieved in BPB instruments. And I think now if we move over to the early years, there's some sites and logs, etc., that you might well recognise. Well, we moved in a bit closer, Mr. Gunn. This is the early years, which I'm sure you'll very well remember. What we've done is chart the history on this, on these panels of BPB from indeed the very early years. The first parts that we're looking at are the 60s and 70s. The most noticeable thing is what you see on the pictures. It's one-man operation, it's very light pieces of equipment, and it is very small units. The company at that stage made immense progress into initially mineral logging, and then went on with the coal logging. And in fact it did make a big hit with not only British Coal but Shell and many other companies that were by nature oil companies, but in fact ended up in the mineral business looking for coal around the world. And this really was the grounding of BPB Instruments Limited. At the start of the 80s, BPB Instruments went into the business of oilfield logging. Through the 80s, in fact, we were really working very hard to try and catch up with the competition, with the ultimate intention of going offshore with logging equipment. This indeed we did achieve in about 1987, 1988, with an absolutely immense array of equipment that was needed at that time. The picture up here actually shows you a complete range of equipment, and I'm sure Dick has shown you this before and extolled its virtues. It was a massive step forward for BPB Instruments. A lot of money was invested in the company, as indeed was a lot of money invested in capital equipment. The sad thing really is that having got all this equipment, it is very, very heavy and it is very, very expensive. The way the industry is going today, in fact, is totally the opposite to that. People don't like spending money. The oil is now a lot cheaper than it was previously. We can't get the price, or the operators can't get the price for the oil. And industry needed a change in some way or another to make exploration considerably more economic than it has been in the past. What BPB Instruments has done, or Wireline Technologies has done to that, is to really go with the industry. We were lucky we had a visit from Shell Research in Holland in about 1989, where the people came and said, slimline, 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 which was, of course, music to our ears. We picked up on that and really continued the developments to smaller tools for smaller diameter boreholes. The whole emphasis was that the smaller the diameter of the borehole that you make, the less expensive it is to drill it, the less cuttings there are to throw away, the less weight that you've got in the casing that goes down into the borehole. The whole thing had made a great deal of sense. It's taken probably 5 years, really, for the industry to understand the economics of the operation, and we really are just seeing at the moment people now saying we need to go slimline. It is really music to our ears at this stage. We want to go slimline, we like slim operations, we understand slim tools, and really with the development work that we've done now over about the last 4 years or so, we are right at the very front of the industry with this new technology. It's good business, and we really do enjoy it at this stage. Okay. Well, we've moved out into the workshop now, Mr. Gunn, just to show you really a comparison between the stuff that we developed during the 80s and what we're looking for in the 90s. The biggest difference was for the oilfield equipment, which is this 4-arm dip meter that we developed, was in fact the size of the boreholes. This particular one was fully open at the moment, and it will actually survey holes up to about 24 inches in diameter, which really truthfully you could almost climb down and look at, let alone survey with a dip meter. What we're looking for now is holes probably up to about 6 or 8 inches in diameter. This is becoming more and more usual around the world as the oil companies in fact look to get a cheaper deal out of drilling these boreholes. Our answer to this, of course, is to go back really where we started, which was the slimline. I just happen to have what we've developed now. This is a 1990s project, is the equivalent. The measurements from these devices are equally good. The only difference, of course, is the size of boreholes that you can actually run the services in. You've got the large 4-arm dip meter. This one's got a ruling diameter of 2 1/4 inches across the main part of the body. This one's about 4.5 inches. But really the only difference in terms of the measurement is the diameter for the caliper arms actually open out to. We believe we've got a big future in this line. There are many other facets to it. We've done some other developments, and I'd like to take you up into the main workshop again and just show you one or two of those. A comparison for you, Mr. Gunn. I'm sorry if you can't hear very well, but it is a noisy workshop that we're in. The large tool at the top is in fact our standard repeat formation sampling tool to allow the pad to come into contact with the formation and taking fluid samples and also measure the pressure. The one below it is in fact indeed the only one in the world, let alone in this company, a very small diameter tool, which will indeed tell you the formation pressures that they have in reservoirs. We're going to go and run this one indeed offshore very, very soon now, probably just about after Christmas, for the Danish oil company Maersk. It's something that we've been working on, is to try and get offshore again, but without the cost infrastructure that we had the last time that we went offshore. And I'll tell you a bit more about that downstairs. I thought I'd just spend a couple of minutes, Mr. Gunn, showing you really why we are getting even more excited, shall I say, about the slim hole operations. As you probably know, that there are thousands upon thousands of boreholes that have been drilled around the world now, which in a lot of cases are starting to reach the end of their economic life. An example of that is the Fortis field that BP drilled in the really mid-60s. It's getting to the stage now where there's very little oil coming out of the reservoir, and they're looking for ways to intervene and actually see what they can do to it to enhance the recovery, do something to try and make the field more economic. If I can just draw a little picture on the board for you. In the North Sea at the moment, there are oil wells that have been drilled down into the producing formations that are something in between 8 to 12,000 feet deep. The hole exists, it is lined, and in the producing formation at the bottom, the casing was very traditionally perforated to enable the oil to actually flow and be recovered, or the oil and gas to flow and be recovered at the surface. A technique now that's being developed is in fact to re-enter these old wells. That is to go down 8 to 12,000 feet to the producing formation and then drill through this casing at the bottom here somewhere, cut a window in the casing, so in fact the drill motor and drill bit can exit and go down and cut a hole right into the producing formation. The RFT that we looked at upstairs, in fact, is going to be run through a section of borehole that is in fact 6,000 feet from the vertical well to actually go through the reservoir. It's a very tight chalk. It's not easy for the oil to actually flow from the chalk, so they want to drill 6,000 feet horizontal well to enhance the production from this well. It's a technique now, it's very early days. This year I think there's been something like about 70 wells drilled of this nature in the whole world. The big reason why BPB are very interested in this, that the existing borehole that's drilled, the internal diameter of that can in fact be as small, this is through the part that's producing, of about 4.5 inches. This means that if they want to do this sort of intervention of coming down the well and then out the side, saving the cost of initially drilling from the surface, they need a very small diameter bit and motor. They also need some means of actually a drill rod that will bend and go horizontal, yet be strong enough to support the drill motor and associated equipment. What actually happened was, probably about 6 years ago, 5 years ago now, it was thought that this particular piece of equipment, and this is what they call coiled tubing, it really is just a steel pipe. It seems totally inflexible if you try and bend it. It is immensely strong and is immensely ductile. And what they're actually doing is running literally drill motors on the end of this. The mud that comes through the centre powers the motor. There's a steering device that actually operates at the bottom. Mud pulses usually up the centre of the tubing to tell them the direction they're drilling in. And this is actually lowered down the well from a very big reel. It goes around the horizontal section and then drills up into the formation. Another idea that came up, and certainly we claim no credit for it, was the idea of putting a standard wireline through the centre of the coiled tubing. As soon as you do that, it is BPB's business without any question at all. At that stage, we've got an electrical connection to a downhole logging tool that can be attached very firmly onto the end of the coiled tubing, and the logging tool, the same way that the drill motor was, can be pushed down through this horizontal section. We recently completed a well of this nature for BEB in Germany. The open hole section that went through the formation was about 4.5 inches in diameter. It was slightly bigger well on this stage, but the way the industry is going at the moment is they want an economic way to produce from these wells, so they're starting to literally run out or they're into some sort of production difficulties, and this really is going to be the only economic way to do it. BPB, I'm pleased to say again, is right at the forefront of this technology. It's lovely slim diameter logging tools. The wireline exists in the coiled tubing, so you don't need the big logging unit at the surface, you just need some means of connecting what is now our small surface computer systems onto the end of it, and we believe that we can offer a very economic service. The 6,000 foot horizontal well that we're doing, probably sometime after Christmas now, will run almost all of our new slim technology that's been developed for these particular applications, and I really do think it's going to make a significant difference to us in the not too distant future. Mr. Gunn, it's been a pleasure showing you around at some of the developments and where we really do see wireline technology is going. I think the future, as we see it at the moment, is very exciting for all sorts of different reasons. All I can really do at this stage is wish you a very speedy recovery. If indeed you can come to see us, we would obviously be very delighted to see you again. All the very best now, and as I say, it's been a great pleasure showing you around.
Well, Ridley, you've had a look round. It's the best we can do at the moment, I'm afraid, since you can't get down here. I was just looking at a few old things the other day and wondering how long it has been since we started all this business, when we first met. Can you remember? I first met you in October 1959 in the attic of Bath House. At least we're both here, which is more than can be said for Bath House. I don't think either of us had any conception of what was going to happen. And I, for one, didn't appreciate that logging could be developed the way it has over the years. There are many memories. I can remember going to Fold, can you, and seeing this funny German named company called Schlumberger coming in to log us a well there, and we said, oh, we can do this without all that amount of money. Can you remember bringing up a recorder from Elliott's in London to meet me on site for the first demonstration for the Opencast? That's got to be in about 1966, I think. Then, what about the day we drove across the Crystal Highway, or along the Crystal Highway in Queensland, and the windscreen broke, and you pushed your hand straight through the windscreen, and we went on after that to do the coal demonstration. I think that's got to be about 1970. And do you remember that drive we had? Swaziland to Botswana in a Land Rover in one day. I still feel stiff as a result of that. But I suppose most of all, what I remember is the great fun it's all been. I think you've enjoyed it, I hope you have. And I'm just going to spend a moment to show you one or two things which I've still got, which you may have forgotten. Mike Spencer showed you some stuff which he said was the early days. We'd been going 12 years by the time he called it the early days. This is the early days. Here we are. This is a log produced in Kirby Thor. That's a bed between there. Two of the drillers were winding the machine and I was recording it. I would say that was 1962. It's the earliest log we've got. Incidentally, did you ever get a paperweight like that out of West Rock? This device, to remember it, underground logger. George Armstrong of the NCB was very keen on this. We rented that to them for 20 years, the last 15 of which was fully depreciated. This is the Haflinger. You can remember that one too. That was in the Opencast in the early 60s. But for comparison, just compare this with what Joe Hall is now building in Oklahoma for us. Here we are. This is what they're producing over there now. This was a vehicle which we actually modified from a second-hand vehicle which had been running east-west across the States for 1 year and covered 300,000 miles. But this is the sort of truck we're now using. Here it is, Ridley. This is our life. The start of BPB Instruments and where we are today. Remember that? This is the growth in the sales all the time when we were in the mineral business. Then we had the various humps and hollows as we started the oil business. And now I'm pleased to say, once again, we're zooming up. Do you remember too the profits we were making? All the way along that curve, the most profitable company in BPB. Then we had a few difficult years, but once again, up we're going. It's an interesting picture, and that's just about sums up what we were doing in the last 25 years together. Well, we've enjoyed making this video, but I've no doubt that you'll think we're better at designing instruments than we are at giving videos. However, as you've found out in the past, we're very fast learners, and I imagine by the time we've done a few more of these, we should be in real production. I hope Ridley you've enjoyed this video, and all the people here wish you the very best of luck, and it won't be too long before I'll be up to see you again.